My son came home from his grandmother's house after Thanksgiving, and when I helped him change into his pajamas that night, he flinched when I touched his ribs. He's 8 years old. He flinched like a dog that had been hit before. I still remember standing there in his bedroom, holding his little dinosaur pajama shirt in my hands, and just freezing. Because the look on his face wasn't pain exactly. It was something worse. It was the look of a kid who had already decided not to say anything, who had already learned that saying something didn't help. That moment cracked something open in me that I haven't been able to close since. His name is Noah. He's got his dad's dark hair and my terrible sense of direction, and he laughs at everything, or he used to, before my mother-in-law got her hands on him, before every visit to her house started chipping away at something I can't quite name. But I feel every single day when I watch him hesitate before he speaks, like he's checking first to make sure whatever he's about to say is acceptable. My mother-in-law's name is Frances. Frances Whitmore. She's 63 years old. She sits on the board of her church's women's ministry. She brings casseroles to sick neighbors and posts Bible verses on Facebook every Sunday morning. And she is, without any question in my mind, one of the cruelest people I have ever met in my life. But I didn't always know that. Or maybe I knew and I just didn't want to know. That's the part I've had to sit with. I married her son Marcus when I was 26. We'd been together for 3 years at that point. And I thought I had a pretty clear picture of who his family was. Frances was particular, sure. She had opinions about everything, the way I loaded the dishwasher, the length of my hair, the fact that I'd kept my job after Noah was born. She made comments, sharp ones. But Marcus always had an explanation ready. She's old-fashioned. She means well. She just doesn't know how to show it. And I was young and I wanted to believe him because I loved him and because believing him was so much easier than the alternative. So I smiled through dinners. I bit my tongue on holidays. I handed Noah over to her on weekends because she asked for more time with him and Marcus said it was important for family bonds, and I told myself I was being the bigger person. Noah was fine. He came home quieter sometimes, but kids are moody. Kids have off days. I told myself that too. The Thanksgiving trip was different from the beginning. Marcus had a work conference. He travels a lot for his job in medical device sales. And Frances had already planned the whole week with Noah before I even knew the conversation was happening. 5 days. Just the two of them at her house in Clarksburg, about 40 minutes from where we lived. She'd already bought tickets to some children's museum, she told me on the phone like it was decided. Like I was going to say yes. I said yes. I've thought about that decision every single day since. When I picked Noah up on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, he ran to me in her driveway the way kids do when they haven't seen their mom. And I held him and I felt something off in the way he held me back. Too tight, too long. Like he was making sure I was real. I told myself I was imagining things. That night I gave him a bath and helped him into his pajamas, and that's when I saw it. His left side, under his ribs, purple. Yellow at the edges, which meant it wasn't new. And when I touched it gently, asking him what happened, he went completely still. The way you go still when you've rehearsed for this moment and you know exactly what you're supposed to say. He said he fell off the swing in Grandma's backyard. He said it to the wall. Not to me. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub and I asked him to look at me. It took him a second. When he finally did, I told him he wasn't in trouble. I told him he could tell me anything and I would never be mad at him for it. I told him I was his mom and my whole job was to keep him safe and I couldn't do that if I didn't know what was happening. He cried for about 30 seconds and then it came out in pieces, the way 8-year-olds tell things. Not in a straight line, but in fragments and circles and things that don't connect until they suddenly do. Grandma had gotten angry because he didn't finish his green beans. She'd grabbed him by the arm, hard, and pulled him to his room. He'd bumped into the doorframe. She told him to stop crying because only babies cry. She called him soft. She told him boys like him. And I need to pause here because when he said, boys like me, I asked what he meant. And he looked at his hands and said, big boys, Mom. She said I eat too much. She told him boys like him needed to learn discipline. He was 8. He's in the 75th percentile for height and weight. His pediatrician has never once expressed a single concern. I held him for a long time after that. I kept my voice even. I kept my face calm. I told him he did nothing wrong. I told him he was perfect exactly the way he was. I told him Grandma was wrong, and then I put him to bed, turned off his light, walked to my own bedroom, sat on the floor next to my nightstand, and shook for about 10 minutes straight. I didn't call Marcus that night. I know that sounds strange, but I needed to think first, and I'd learned over the years that when Francis was involved, Marcus's first instinct was always to find the version of events that let everyone off the hook. I needed to know exactly what I was going to do before I gave anyone the chance to talk me out of it. The next morning, I called Noah's pediatrician before he was even awake. I explained what I'd found and what he'd told me. They got us in that afternoon. The doctor, a woman I've trusted since Noah was 3 weeks old, documented everything. She took photographs. She noted the bruising pattern, which she said was inconsistent with a fall from a swing. She asked Noah her own questions, gently, in the way pediatricians are trained to do, and Noah told her the same things he'd told me in the same halting fragments. Before we left, she told me I needed to file a report with Child Protective Services. She said she was also obligated to file one herself. She walked me through what that would look like and what to expect. I sat in the parking lot of that office and called my sister-in-law first. Marcus's younger sister, Annette, who had grown up in that house and who I'd always sensed carried something heavy from those years without ever saying it directly. I told her what happened. There was a long silence. And then she said, very quietly, "I'm not surprised. I'm so sorry. I should have told you more than I did." That sentence taught me a lot. I filed the CPS report that evening. I also called a family law attorney, a woman named, well, I'll just call her my attorney, who had been referred to me by a friend. She told me to document everything. She told me not to confront Francis yet. She told me to write down everything Noah had told me, with timestamps, and to keep copies of the pediatrician's report somewhere Francis and Marcus could not access. I did all of that, and then I did more. I went through my phone. I had 2 voicemails from Frances from over the past year, one where she referenced Noah's appetite in a way that now made my skin crawl, and one from about 8 months ago where she told me, in her syrupy voice, that I was letting that boy get away with too much and that a little firmness never hurt anyone. I saved them both. I screen-recorded them. I sent copies to 3 different email addresses. I reached back out to Annette and asked if she'd be willing to write down anything she remembered from her own childhood, anything that felt relevant. She said yes without hesitating. Then I had to figure out Marcus. We talked the next day. I waited until Noah was at school. I sat down at the kitchen table and I told Marcus what had happened, calmly, and I watched his face do the thing it always does when Francis is involved. This flicker of discomfort that quickly reorganizes itself into skepticism. He asked if I was sure. He asked if Noah might have been confused. He asked if I'd talked to his mom yet. I told him I had medical documentation from Noah's pediatrician, a CPS case number, the voicemails, and an attorney. I said those things quietly, one at a time, like I was reading off a list. He was quiet for a while. Then he said he needed to call his mom. I told him he could do whatever he needed to do, but that until further notice, Noah would not be setting foot in Francis's house, and if he tried to take our son there without my knowledge, I had already spoken to an attorney about what that would mean legally. Marcus didn't call Francis that day. I don't know if that was the documentation or something else shifting in him. Maybe, somewhere underneath all those years of excusing her, something finally broke through. He asked to see the photos from the pediatrician. I showed him. He looked at them for a long time without saying anything. He said, "I didn't know it had gotten this bad." I wanted to ask him what he'd thought it looks like, but I didn't, because that conversation was for another day and the most important thing right then was Noah. Frances, meanwhile, had no idea any of this was happening. She texted me twice that week, once to ask about Christmas plans, once to send me a recipe for sweet potato casserole. I didn't respond to either. I kept every text as documentation. I got Noah set up with a child psychologist within the week, a specialist in trauma-informed care who worked with children. I cannot tell you what a difference it made within the first 2 sessions. Just having someone who was trained for exactly this, who knew how to talk to him, who helped him understand that what happened to him was wrong and that it wasn't his fault. He started talking again. He started laughing again, tentatively at first, and then more like himself. That was the thing I cared about most. Not Francis. Not the CPS case. Not whatever was going to happen with Marcus. Noah healing. That was the only finish line that mattered. The CPS investigation moved forward. A caseworker came to our home and spoke with Noah separately. Based on the pediatric documentation and Noah's account, Frances was notified that she was under investigation. My attorney helped us secure a temporary no-contact order. Frances could not see or communicate with Noah while the investigation was ongoing. That's when Frances called Marcus, and then she called me. 6 times in one evening. I let all 6 go to voicemail. Her messages started out confused, then moved to wounded, then moved to something that I can only describe as her real self. The voice underneath the casseroles and the Bible verses, telling me I was destroying her family, that I had taken a normal disciplinary incident and turned it into something criminal, that I had always been difficult, that I had never truly respected her, that Marcus should be ashamed of himself for allowing this. I saved every single voicemail. My attorney had a field day. Frances was the kind of woman who had built her entire identity on the image of a devout, respected matriarch. She was a fixture at her church, Grace Community Baptist, where she'd been a member for over 30 years, where her name was on the donor wall in the lobby, where she led the women's Bible study every Thursday morning. She was, by all appearances, untouchable. I want to be honest about something. What I did next? I've thought about it a lot since. Whether it was the right thing. Whether it was about justice, or whether some of it was about something less noble. I've talked about it with my therapist, and I've decided that it was both, and that I'm okay with that. Grace Community Baptist held their annual Christmas Eve service on December 24th. Big attendance. Frances had told me once that they got close to 500 people at the Christmas Eve service. It was the crown jewel of their year. Frances always sat in the 3rd row. She had, at that point, been sending Marcus lengthy emails about how this was a misunderstanding, how she was being persecuted, how I had manipulated a child into lying about her. She'd sent me a letter, an actual printed letter, mailed to our house, that my attorney described as a gift. The Thursday before Christmas, I went to the church office. I introduced myself to the church administrator, a kind woman who, it turned out, had some idea that Frances was a complicated figure in that community, because her face did a very specific thing when I said Frances's name. I asked if I could speak with the senior pastor. They asked what it was regarding. I said it was a matter involving a congregant and a child safety investigation, and I had documentation. I met with the pastor for an hour. I brought the pediatric report. I brought the no-contact order. I brought the voicemails. I did not raise my voice once. By the time I left, the pastor had my attorney's contact information and had told me, carefully, that the church took these matters very seriously and that they would be following up. Frances was quietly asked not to lead the Christmas Eve women's ministry segment. She was told the church needed to review the situation before she could continue in her leadership roles. This happened in a phone call from the pastor's office on December 22nd. I know this because Marcus told me. He'd spoken to her after. He said she was beside herself. He said she kept insisting she'd done nothing wrong. Noah and I spent Christmas Eve at my parents' house, 3 hours away in Columbus. He wore his new pajamas and ate too many Christmas cookies and fell asleep on my dad's couch watching a movie, and I sat in the kitchen with my mom and held a mug of tea and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Just quiet. Just peace. Just my kids safe and asleep 20 feet away. The CPS investigation concluded in February. The findings were substantiated, meaning they determined the abuse had occurred as reported. Frances was placed on the state's child abuse registry. She was prohibited from having unsupervised contact with minors, which effectively ended her ability to continue in most of her church roles. Marcus and I. That's a longer, harder story. We're in couples counseling now. He's doing his own individual therapy. He's made commitments that I'm watching him keep, slowly, day by day. I don't know yet where we're going to land. What I know is that he finally stopped making excuses for her, and that for the first time in our marriage, I feel like we're on the same side. Whether that's enough to rebuild on, I genuinely don't know. But I'm not willing to decide yet. What I do know is this. The morning after I got the CPS findings, I went into Noah's room while he was still sleeping, and I just looked at him for a while. He was sprawled sideways across his pillow the way he always sleeps, one arm hanging off the bed, completely boneless the way only kids can sleep. He looked so easy, so safe. I had spent so many years trying not to make waves, trying to keep the peace, telling myself that Francis was just difficult, and that was something every family dealt with, and that I should be grateful for what we had. I had handed my son over to a woman who hurt him, and I had not looked closely enough to see it coming, and that is something I will carry with me. But I also fought for him when it counted. I got him a doctor. I got him a therapist. I got him away from her. I did not let anyone talk me out of it. Nobody puts their hands on my kid. Not a grandmother, not a pillar of the community, not someone with 30 years of the same church and a name on a donor wall. Nobody. And if you're reading this because something similar is happening to you, if you have that feeling in your stomach, that low-grade wrong that you keep explaining away, please listen to it. Get your child to a doctor. Write everything down. Call an attorney before you confront anyone. Document before you act. You don't have to be loud to be lethal. I've thought a lot about what Frances actually believed she was doing, and I think, honestly, this is the hardest part to sit with. I think she believed she was right. I think she thought that grabbing an 8-year-old by the arm, weaving bruises on his ribs, calling him soft, telling him his body was a problem. I think she genuinely believed that was love. Discipline. Preparation for the world. That's what makes it so insidious. The cruelest people rarely think of themselves as cruel. But here's what I've come to understand. What you do in private always finds its way into the light eventually. Not because of fate, not because of some cosmic scoreboard, but because actions have weight. They leave marks, literal ones, in Noah's case, and marks get noticed. Frances had been doing this for decades, probably. Getting away with it, building her reputation, brick by brick, while doing damage behind closed doors. And the only reason she kept getting away with it was because the people around her kept choosing comfort over truth. Marcus, his sister Annette, who told me she should have said more. Maybe others I'll never know about. I was one of those people too, for years. That's the thing I can't let myself forget. I chose comfort. I took the easier interpretation every single time. Kids are moody. She means well. She's old-fashioned. I handed my son to a woman who hurt him because looking closely felt too costly. And that cost me, it cost Noah, far more than the discomfort of seeing clearly would have. What changed everything wasn't rage. It was clarity. The moment I sat on the edge of that bathtub and watched my son go still, rehearsed, already protecting himself at 8 years old, something in me just went very, very quiet. And in that quiet, I knew exactly what I had to do. Not what felt satisfying, not what felt dramatic. What was actually going to help him? Get him to a doctor. Document everything. Find an attorney. Get him into therapy. Move in order, not in emotion. That's what I mean about intelligence being a form of courage. It would have been so easy to drive to Frances's house that night and scream at her. It would have felt like doing something, but it would have helped nobody. Least of all, Noah. The smarter, harder choice was to slow down. Think. Build something she couldn't talk her way out of. Let the truth be the weapon instead of my anger. And the truth was enough. It always is, when you document it properly. Noah is doing well now. He laughs like himself again. He's back to arguing with me about bedtime and leaving his cleats in the middle of the kitchen floor and all the ordinary, beautiful, exhausting things that 8-year-olds do. His therapist told me recently that he's made remarkable progress. I cried in my car after that appointment for about 5 minutes, and then I got a coffee and drove home. The lesson I keep coming back to, if I can call it that, is that protecting the people you love requires you to be willing to be uncomfortable, to look at things directly instead of at an angle, to ask the hard questions and sit with the hard answers. Frances had power because everyone around her chose not to look directly at her. The moment I looked, really looked, documented what I saw, and walked it into a room where it couldn't be minimized, her power evaporated. Nobody gets to hurt your child and remain comfortable. Not if you're willing to be inconvenient about it. That's all it took. Not violence, not revenge for its own sake, just the inconvenient, documented, undeniable truth, delivered calmly to the right people at the right time. Noah deserved someone who would do that for him. Every kid does.